The rain began without warning on a quiet countryside road where the world felt far away from noise and rush. Soft gray clouds moved slowly overhead, and the first drops touched the earth with a calm rhythm. The road stretched toward the hills, and there were no cars passing by. The only sound was the gentle tapping of rain on leaves and wooden roofs. Keanu Reeves was driving alone through this silent route, hoping to clear his mind after a long week. He loved peaceful places where thoughts could settle and where a person could breathe without pressure. The sudden rain made him slow down, and he noticed a small wooden shelter beside the road. It looked old but safe enough to stop for a moment. He pulled over and stepped inside as the rain grew stronger and sharper. Inside the shelter, he felt a strange calm but also a strange tension, as if something unexpected was about to happen. He took a slow breath and watched the rain flood the ground outside. Then he heard soft footsteps. Someone else had stopped for the same reason. Sandra Bullock entered the shelter holding her light jacket close to keep it dry. She did not know he was there until she stepped fully inside. When she looked up, her eyes widened with surprise and warmth. It had been months since they last met in person. They both smiled gently, but their smiles were quiet and thoughtful. The rain kept falling heavily around them, creating a circle of sound that made the shelter feel almost like a separate little world. Sandra sat on the bench at one side, and Keanu stood near the wooden post looking out into the wet landscape. Neither spoke for the first few seconds. They shared a peaceful silence, but there was something deeper in the air, something that made the moment feel heavier than a simple coincidence. Sandra finally broke the quiet with a soft voice. She said it was strange to meet him here on such a lonely road at such an unexpected time. Her tone was light, but her eyes were studying him carefully. She noticed that he looked calm on the surface, yet there was something in his expression, something she could not name. It was not sadness. It was not worry. It was something she had only seen in people who had been trying to handle their thoughts alone for too long. Keanu nodded and told her he had been driving without any plan, just following the road until he felt like stopping. He said he liked the silence here, but his voice had a softness that hinted at something unsaid. Sandra felt it instantly. She had known him long enough to recognize when he was carrying something in his heart. She leaned back slightly and let the rain fill the space between them. She did not push him to speak. She simply offered her presence in a gentle way. The rain grew heavier, and the sound grew louder, as if the world outside wanted to hide their little meeting from everything else. Keanu shifted his weight and looked at the ground for a long moment. Sandra noticed his eyes were distant. He was thinking about something, and she wondered if he was trying to decide whether he should share it or not. The atmosphere inside the shelter felt warm but also full of suspense. Every small movement, every drop of rain added to the tension between what was said and what was still hidden. A sudden flash of lightning lit up the sky, and Keanu flinched slightly. It was small and quick, but Sandra saw it. He was rarely startled by anything, which made her even more curious. She asked him softly if he was all right. He looked at her with eyes that held a quiet weight, and then he looked away again. He said he was fine, but the answer did not match the feeling coming from him. She waited patiently, letting him take his time. She knew he would speak when he was ready. Keanu finally moved closer to the bench, but he did not sit. He rested his hand on the wooden surface and spoke in a low voice. He told her he had seen someone earlier on the road, someone sitting alone under a tree near the roadside. The person had looked young and lost, and when Keanu stopped to ask if he needed help, the young man had waved him away and turned his face. Keanu had driven on, but the moment stayed in his mind. He said he felt like he should have done more. He felt like he had walked away from someone who needed something, but did not know how to ask. Sandra listened with full attention. She saw how deeply the moment had stayed with him. She understood the type of heart that cared even about strangers in the rain. She leaned forward slightly and said gently that sometimes people push help away even when they need it the most. She said that kindness does not fail just because a person does not accept it immediately. Her voice was calm but supportive, and Keanu looked at her with grateful eyes even though he did not say much. The rain softened a little and became a steady, calm drizzle. Inside the shelter, the air felt warmer now. The tension did not disappear, but it changed into a quiet connection. Sandra could tell Keanu still had more inside him. He was not only troubled about the stranger. He was troubled about something deeper, something personal. She felt he was trying to choose whether to open up further or keep it inside. Keanu stepped outside the shelter but stayed under the roof where the rain could not reach him. He looked at the wet road, the hills, the sky, and then he spoke again. This time his voice had more weight. He said the young man he saw reminded him of himself from many years ago, someone trying to look strong even when he felt lost, someone who did not want people to see the weakness he carried inside, someone who used silence to hide pain. Sandra heard the honesty in his words, and her expression softened even more. She walked a few steps closer but kept enough distance to respect the space he needed. She said he had grown through so much and that some memories return not to hurt, but to remind a person how far they have come. Keanu remained quiet, but the quietness felt different now. It felt like he was slowly letting the moment loosen the heaviness in his heart. The rain kept falling softly around them like a peaceful curtain that isolated them from the world. They stood there together, listening to nature, listening to each other. The moment felt real and human, and full of a gentle emotional pull. Neither realized how much time was passing because the silence between them was warm and full of unspoken comfort. And then something unexpected happened. From far down the road, Sandra noticed a slight movement. It looked like a figure sitting under a tree in the distance. Her heart tightened and she gently touched Keanu's arm to make him look. His eyes widened slowly. The shape under the tree was familiar. The rain was hiding it slightly, but the outline was clear enough. The young man he had talked about earlier was still there, sitting alone in the rain, waiting, or hiding, or hurting. They did not know yet. The moment froze both of them. This was not just a memory returning. This was something real unfolding right in front of them, something that pulled Keanu's heart with sudden force. The rain, the quiet road, the unexpected meeting, everything had led to this moment. The rain continued with a soft, steady sound as Keanu and Sandra stared toward the figure sitting under the distant tree. The world around them felt slow and unsure, as if time itself had paused to let them decide what would happen next. Sandra looked at Keanu and saw a deep pull in his eyes. It was not fear. It was not panic. It was something heavier and more emotional. She understood that he felt responsible for the moment he left earlier. She also understood that he was worried the young man might be in pain or danger, and he did not want to ignore it again. The two of them stepped out from the shelter and walked toward the distant figure. The road was wet and small puddles formed under their shoes with soft splashes. The sky had dimmed slightly, but there was still enough light to guide them. Sandra kept glancing at Keanu as they walked. She saw the tension building in his shoulders. She felt it too. Something about this moment felt important. It felt like they were approaching a hidden truth that neither of them had expected when they stopped for the rain. As they continued forward, the figure under the tree became clearer. The young man was sitting with his knees pulled close to his chest and his head lowered. His clothes were soaked from the rain. There was no umbrella, no bag, nothing that suggested he had planned to be here. The way he sat was not casual. It was heavy. It was the way someone sits when they have been carrying things inside for too long and no longer know what to do with them. Sandra slowed down slightly and whispered to Keanu that they should approach gently. She did not want to scare him or make him feel cornered. Keanu nodded. His steps became slower and softer. He remembered how the young man pushed him away earlier, and he did not want to repeat the same mistake. He wanted to show care without force. They reached a few feet away from him. The rain fell more lightly now, but the wind carried the cold across the road. Keanu spoke first in a calm, quiet voice. He said he was the same person who stopped earlier, and he only wanted to check if the young man was okay. There was no answer. The young man did not look up. His body trembled slightly, as if he was either cold or overwhelmed by something inside. Sandra stepped forward slowly and crouched a little to be on the same level. She kept her voice gentle and warm. She said they did not want anything from him. She told him the rain had brought them here, and they only wanted to make sure he was not alone. She told him they knew what silence feels like when the world becomes too heavy. These words made a small difference. The young man lifted his head just a little, but his face was hidden behind wet hair. Keanu took off his jacket and held it in his hand. He wanted to place it around the young man, but he waited for permission. He asked quietly if he could help him stay warm. The young man hesitated. He took a slow breath that sounded shaky and unsure. Then he nodded weakly. Keanu moved closer and placed the jacket around his shoulders. The young man's voice came out very soft, almost like a whisper. He said he was sorry. He said he did not mean to be rude earlier. He just did not want anyone to see him like this. Sandra and Keanu exchanged a look. There was relief, but also a deep concern. Sandra asked him if something had happened. She made it clear he did not have to share anything if he did not want to. She wanted him to feel safe. The young man stayed silent again for a long moment. Raindrops slid from his hair and down his face. He lifted his hand and wiped his eyes quickly as if he did not want them to know he had been crying. Finally, he spoke. He said he had been walking for hours with no destination. He said he had left home after an argument that went wrong. He said he felt lost and scared, and he did not know where else to go. When Keanu saw him earlier, he waved him away because he was ashamed. He said he felt weak and he did not want a stranger to see the pain he was trying to hide. His words carried a quiet heartbreak. Keanu felt something stir inside him. He remembered moments from his own past when he had tried to hide sadness behind silence. He felt the weight of the young man's loneliness and he understood it deeply. Sandra listened with full empathy. She placed her hand gently on the trunk of the tree near him and spoke softly. She told him everyone gets lost sometimes. She told him even strong people crumble when the world becomes too much. She told him crying does not make anyone weak. The young man looked up for the first time and his face was tired. He had the look of someone who had been holding emotions for too long. He asked why they cared. He said they did not know him. He said people usually walk away when someone becomes difficult or emotional. Keanu knelt down beside him gently. He told him that people do not need to know your whole life to care for you. Sometimes one moment is enough. Sometimes a heart recognizes pain even if it comes from a stranger. The young man's eyes filled again, but this time he did not hide it. Sandra reached into her pocket and took out a small, clean cloth. She handed it to him with a warm smile. He accepted it and wiped his face slowly. The rain around them grew softer until it felt like a thin layer of mist rather than a storm. The air felt calmer as if the world wanted to give them space. Keanu asked him if he had any place he wanted to go or if he needed someone to talk to. The young man shook his head. He said he did not want to go back home yet. He said the argument had opened feelings he did not know how to handle. He said he felt like everything around him had become too hard to understand. Sandra listened carefully and then asked him his name. He hesitated again, but finally whispered it. At that moment, something changed in Keanu's expression. His eyes widened slightly. It was a tiny reaction, but Sandra caught it instantly. Something about the young man's name had affected him deeply. Sandra felt a sudden tension form between the three of them. The young man did not notice. He was staring at the ground again, trying to steady his breath. Keanu took a slow breath and asked the young man a gentle question. He asked him where he was originally headed before he sat under the tree. The young man answered. He said he had been walking toward a small house located deeper in the countryside. He said it belonged to someone he had not seen in years, someone he used to trust when he was younger. He said he was hoping that person might still remember him. Sandra and Keanu exchanged another look, this time heavier, deeper. There was something in those words that felt like a missing piece finally sliding into place. The rain fell quietly as the truth slowly revealed itself in their minds. Keanu asked him one more question. He asked who this person was. The young man hesitated again and then whispered the answer. The name he spoke was someone from Keanu's own past, someone he had once known very closely, someone he had not expected to hear about on this quiet, rainy road. Sandra felt her breath catch. Keanu's expression shifted with shock, sadness, and something almost like destiny. Their encounter was not random. The rain softened into a thin fog as the young man's words settled heavily in the air. Sandra felt the shift immediately. It was as if the world around them grew still, while an invisible thread pulled Keanu backward into memories he had locked away for years. The young man sat quietly with Keanu's jacket wrapped around him and did not realize the weight of what he had just revealed. He did not know that his path had crossed with someone who carried pieces of the same past. Sandra watched Keanu closely. His eyes did not blink. His face did not change quickly or sharply. Instead, it shifted slowly like someone trying to understand a truth that felt too strange to accept at once. She had seen Keanu calm in dangerous moments. She had seen him steady in emotional situations, but this was different. There was a deep recognition inside him that he was trying to manage with grace. Keanu asked the young man to repeat the name, and the young man whispered it again with the same tired softness. This time, Keanu lowered his gaze to the wet ground and stood in still silence. The rain formed tiny ripples on the puddles near his shoes. Sandra stepped closer and placed her hand lightly on his arm. He did not move, but she felt the tension vibrating inside him like a quiet storm. She asked him gently what the name meant to him. She knew he would answer only if he felt ready. Keanu lifted his eyes slowly and looked at the young man with a mixture of pain and compassion. He said the name belonged to someone he had not seen since his early years, someone who had been like an older brother to him during a very vulnerable time in his life, someone who taught him strength and kindness when he needed it. The young man raised his head slowly. His expression changed with confusion and curiosity. He asked Keanu how he knew the person he was searching for. Keanu sat down beside him on the wet ground without thinking about the cold or the dirt. He did not want distance between them now. He wanted honesty and calm. He told the young man about the house he had visited many times when he was young. He described the garden, the old wooden fence, the sound of the river behind the backyard, and the laughter that once filled the rooms. He said the person he knew had helped him through some of his darkest days. He said he had always planned to thank him properly, but life moved too fast and they eventually lost contact. The young man listened with wide eyes. Every detail matched the place he had tried to walk toward. Sandra crouched beside both of them. She sensed a deep connection forming even before either of them realized it fully. She touched the trunk of the tree lightly and felt the rough, wet bark. She watched the two faces near her. They looked like two people standing at the edge of a truth that could change everything. Keanu asked the young man a very gentle question. He asked what his connection was to the person he was planning to visit. The young man took a slow breath and looked down at his hands. He said the person was his father. He said he had not seen him in years. He said they had argued many times, and recently the distance between them had grown too sharp to fix easily. He said he left home that day hoping to find the old house because he wanted to speak with his father one last time. He said he wanted to understand him. He wanted to know why their relationship had turned painful. He wanted to see if there was still love hidden somewhere beneath the silence. When he said the word father, Keanu's heart tightened. He looked at Sandra with a quiet shock that traveled through her too. She understood the connection instantly. Keanu and the young man were not strangers. Their lives had been linked long before this rainy day. The person the young man called father was the same person who once treated Keanu like family. The same person who had guided him, taught him, helped him, and then disappeared from his life without explanation. Sandra felt a deep emotional pull. The rain around them felt softer now, almost like it was listening to their conversation. Keanu took a deep breath and asked the young man if he remembered the name of the person who used to visit his father many years ago. Someone his father spoke about as if he were his own younger brother. The young man tried to think back. He said he remembered hearing stories about someone. Someone gentle, someone strong, someone who went through hard times but always kept a good heart. He tried to recall the name, but he could not remember fully. Keanu smiled sadly. He understood. It had been too many years. He told the young man quietly that he was the person his father used to talk about. The young man froze. He looked at Keanu with disbelief. His breath quickened as if he had been running. Sandra placed a hand on his shoulder to steady him. Keanu continued speaking in the same calm voice. He said he had been very close to his father during a difficult stage of his life. He said the man had taken him in when he felt alone. He said he owed him kindness that he never forgot. The young man's lips trembled. He asked Keanu why he had never returned. He asked why he had disappeared from their lives. The question carried no blame, only pain. Keanu lowered his head again. He said life had taken him in directions he could not control. He said he never stopped thinking about that family, but sometimes distance grows even when the heart does not want it to. He said he wished he had returned, but he did not know if he would be welcome. Sandra listened to every word with full empathy. She saw the way both of their voices held regret. She saw how the past had created wounds that neither of them deserved. She wanted to speak, but she let the quiet sit between them first. The rain whispered on the leaves above them as if giving space to their emotions. Keanu finally asked the young man why he had left home so suddenly. The young man explained that he and his father had a fight about responsibility and choices. He said he felt like he was becoming someone his father did not respect, and that scared him. He said he walked away because he did not know how to be strong anymore. Keanu placed a hand on his back gently. He said strength does not come from pretending everything is fine. It comes from facing pain even when it hurts. The young man began to cry again, but this time he did not hide. Sandra moved closer and sat beside him. She told him that pain sometimes builds walls between people, but kindness can break them down. She told him that his father may be carrying his own fears too. She said the only way to understand is to face each other with honesty. The young man wiped his eyes and asked if the old house still existed. He said he had been walking in the right direction, but he did not know how close he was. Keanu nodded and pointed farther down the road. He said the house was not far. He said they could reach it in a short walk. The young man breathed in sharply as if the idea of facing his father felt heavy but hopeful. Sandra suggested they walk together. She said they should not let him go alone while he was in this fragile state. Keanu agreed. He stood slowly and offered his hand to the young man. The young man hesitated before accepting it. His hand shook slightly, but Keanu held it firmly with support and warmth. They all stood under the rain together with a shared sense of purpose. The young man wrapped the jacket tighter around himself. Sandra walked beside him on one side and Keanu on the other. The road ahead felt long but meaningful. The moment felt like the beginning of something important. As they began walking, Sandra felt a shift in the air. Not fear, not worry, but a quiet suspense as if the world was preparing them for a truth they had not yet uncovered. The rain fell gently, the trees swayed softly, and the distant countryside grew quieter. None of them knew that the house they were walking toward held more than a reunion. It held a secret that would soon reveal why fate brought them together on this rainy road. The road ahead was narrow and covered with a soft layer of rainwater that reflected the dim afternoon sky. Keanu walked beside the young man with steady steps while Sandra kept pace on his other side. The atmosphere felt fragile but hopeful, as if every step carried a quiet meaning. The rain had softened into a mist that floated lightly over the ground like a thin veil. The countryside was silent except for the gentle rustle of wet leaves. Sandra felt the stillness deeply. It was the kind of silence that made every breath feel important. Keanu kept glancing at the young man with a gentle, protective expression. He could see the struggle inside him. The boy was trying to stay calm, but his hands shook slightly. His eyes were swollen from crying, and his breath came in small, uneven waves. Sandra noticed too. She walked a little closer and offered her presence without words. Sometimes silence brought comfort in ways language could not. As they continued walking, the young man suddenly slowed down. He looked ahead with a nervous expression and whispered that he remembered this path. The road curved gently around a small group of trees and then stretched toward a distant hill. On that hill stood an old two-story wooden house with a wide porch and a few broken railings. The house looked worn but not unloved, the kind of place that had history carved into every corner. The young man's breath trembled again. Sandra put a gentle hand on his shoulder and waited for him to steady himself. The path felt longer than it truly was because each step brought them closer to memories they could not avoid. Keanu felt something heavy building inside him, too. He remembered sitting on that very porch as a teenager trying to find courage to face his own fears. He remembered the man who had guided him during that time with a firm voice and a kind heart. He had not expected to return like this with the man's son walking beside him. As they reached the foot of the hill, the young man stopped again. He whispered that he did not know what his father would say or how he would react. He said he was scared. He said things between them had become so tense that he could not predict anything. Keanu stepped in front of him gently. He told him that fear grows stronger when a person faces it alone, but becomes softer when shared. He reminded him that he was not walking this path alone anymore. Sandra nodded and told him that sometimes the hardest conversations become the ones that heal the most. The young man took a long breath, then another. He nodded slowly and began walking again. The three of them climbed the small slope toward the house. The wooden steps creaked gently under their feet. The porch smelled of wet wood and old memories. Sandra looked around. She could feel the quiet emotions that lived inside the walls. It felt like a place filled with both comfort and pain. She noticed a few flower pots on the left side of the porch, even though the plants inside them were wilted. Someone had tried to keep them alive. Keanu motioned for the young man to knock. The boy lifted his hand, but it trembled so much that he lowered it again. Sandra reached out gently and steadied his wrist. She whispered that he did not have to be perfect. He only had to be honest. With a deep, shaky breath, the young man knocked 3 soft times on the old wooden door. They waited. There was silence at first, the kind of silence that stretched long enough to make the air feel tighter. Sandra looked at Keanu and saw a mixture of memory and fear in his eyes. They kept waiting until they finally heard slow footsteps from inside. The door creaked open and a middle-aged man stood there. His clothes were simple. His hair was slightly gray. His eyes were tired but strong. The moment he saw his son, his breath caught in his chest. The young man whispered the word father, but his voice broke before he could say more. The man's expression softened immediately. He stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on his son's face. He asked if he was all right. His voice was low but filled with worry. The young man lowered his gaze and said he was sorry for everything that happened. His voice trembled and tears filled his eyes again. Then the man noticed Keanu standing just behind him. His face froze. He blinked slowly as if he could not believe who he was seeing. He whispered Keanu's name in disbelief. Keanu felt his throat tight. He greeted him softly. The man stepped back with a look that mixed shock, relief, and an emotion too deep to name. Sandra watched the two men see each other after so many years. She felt the weight of the moment in her chest. Father stepped aside and invited them in. The inside of the house smelled like old wood, warm tea, and quiet evenings. The living room had a couch with a blanket neatly folded on it and a small table with books stacked beside it. Sandra noticed photographs on the wall. Some were old, some were recent. Most of them showed the father and the young man at different ages. Some showed a younger Keanu smiling beside them. Sandra felt a soft ache in her heart. This house held so much history, so many memories. They all sat slowly. The young man sat nearest to the fireplace. Sandra sat beside him and Keanu sat across facing both of them. The father sat in an old wooden chair. He looked between his son and Keanu quietly. After a long moment he asked his son why he had come, and the young man explained everything about their argument. He spoke slowly but honestly. His voice cracked at parts, but he did not hide it. The father listened with full attention. He did not interrupt. He did not raise his voice. He let his son express everything, even the painful parts. Then he spoke. He said he loved his son more than anything. He said the argument happened because he was scared of losing him. He said he wanted the best for him, but did not know how to show it without sounding strict. The young man cried again, but this time the tears carried relief instead of shame. Sandra felt the emotions in the room shift. The painful distance between father and son was slowly closing. Keanu watched quietly with soft understanding. He had experienced the same warmth from the man many years ago. As the father and son continued talking, a strange, quiet emotion crossed the father's face. He looked at Keanu again, and this time his eyes held something heavy. He asked why Keanu never returned. Keanu took a deep breath. He said life took him far away and he feared stepping into old memories. He said he thought maybe he would not be welcome. The father shook his head and said he had always hoped to see him again. He said he always kept a place in his heart for him. The room fell silent again, but it was a peaceful silence. Then the father said something unexpected, something that changed the atmosphere instantly. He looked at his son and then at Keanu and said there was something he should have revealed years ago, something that connected all of them in a way none of them knew. Sandra felt the air grow heavy again. Keanu leaned forward slightly. The young man went still. The father took a slow breath. He said the secret he had kept was about Keanu's past, about something Keanu never discovered, something that could change him forever. The room froze. The rain outside stopped, as if the sky itself was waiting for the truth to unfold. The room grew so quiet that even the soft ticking of a clock in the corner felt loud. Sandra held her breath without realizing it. The young man looked between his father and Keanu with wide, confused eyes. Keanu sat perfectly still, but inside him something uneasy began to rise like a slow wave. The father lowered his gaze and rubbed his hands together as if searching for strength he had buried long ago. He finally looked at Keanu and said there was a time in Keanu's life when things were very dark and unstable. Keanu nodded slowly. He remembered those years. He remembered the loneliness and the pain. The father continued speaking gently. He said that during that time he did not just guide Keanu like a mentor or friend. He protected him in a way few people ever understood. He said Keanu had been in danger of losing everything emotionally and mentally, and he could not let that happen. Keanu felt confusion mixed with unease. He asked what he meant. The father sighed deeply before explaining. He said Keanu had been very young when he stayed in this house. He said Keanu believed he had arrived here by chance because he needed help, but that was only half the truth. Sandra leaned forward slowly. The father's voice grew softer and heavier. He said there was something Keanu never knew about his connection to this family. The young man shifted uncomfortably. He asked his father what he was talking about. The father paused again before finally speaking the words he had held inside for too many years. He told Keanu that he had not just taken him in out of kindness. He had taken him in because he had made a promise to someone important from Keanu's past, someone Keanu barely remembered, someone who had trusted the father with Keanu's safety. Keanu's eyes widened slowly. Sandra felt her heart pound as she watched him try to understand. He asked who made the promise. The father looked directly into his eyes and said the name Keanu had not heard in a very long time. The name of a family friend Keanu had lost when he was very young. The person who passed away before Keanu ever had a chance to ask questions. The father said that person had begged him to look after Keanu if life ever became too heavy for him. And when Keanu eventually reached that dark moment, the father kept his promise and brought him into his home without revealing the truth. Sandra placed a hand over her chest. She could feel the shock radiating through the room. The young man turned to Keanu with a stunned expression. He whispered that he never knew Keanu had such a connection to his father. Keanu felt his breath grow shallow. He remembered moments from that time, but he had never realized the depth behind them. He remembered trust, comfort, and guidance, but he never imagined it came from a promise made in loyalty and love. The father continued speaking. He said he knew Keanu needed stability back then, and he tried his best to offer it. He said he kept the truth hidden because he did not want to add emotional weight to Keanu's already heavy life. He believed the truth might confuse or overwhelm him. He thought silence was protection. Keanu looked down at his hands. His fingers trembled slightly. He felt a mix of gratitude, sadness, and disbelief. Sandra moved closer and placed a gentle hand on his back. He breathed slowly, trying to steady himself. The young man asked why he had never been told either. The father explained that he wanted to tell them both when the right time came, but years passed too quickly. Then misunderstandings and distance grew. He said he carried the truth alone because he did not know how to open it without reopening old wounds. He looked at his son and said he regretted staying silent. He looked at Keanu and said he feared he had caused pain by hiding the truth. Keanu lifted his eyes and softly told him he did not feel anger. He said he only felt surprised and emotional. He said he wished he had known earlier so he could have thanked him properly. The father's eyes filled with tears. He said he did not need thanks. He said protecting Keanu had been an honor. He said Keanu had changed his life too, but he never felt safe enough to express it. The young man looked at Keanu with a new expression. It was not confusion anymore, it was respect. He said he had grown up hearing his father speak about a young person he admired, someone strong yet gentle, someone kind even through hardship. He said he never knew that person was Keanu all along. This realization hit Keanu deeply. He felt warmth rise inside him. Sandra saw the shift in his posture. Something inside him was healing quietly. The father then revealed something even more unexpected. He said that when the young man was born, he wanted to name him after someone who inspired him, someone who once taught him what resilience looked like, someone who showed him what a young heart could endure and still stay pure. He said he wanted his son to carry that strength too. The young man blinked in confusion again. He asked who he was named after. The father looked at Keanu and then at his son. He said his son's middle name was given in honor of Keanu. The young man froze. Sandra gasped quietly. Keanu felt his breath tremble. The father explained that he had hoped one day his son and Keanu would meet again so the young man could see the person behind the story he carried in his name. The young man whispered his own middle name softly, and it suddenly felt heavier and more meaningful. He looked at Keanu with new eyes. Awe, shock, connection. Sandra felt the emotional waves surrounding all three of them. She had never seen such a moment unfold with so much honest human vulnerability. Keanu looked at the father with humility. He said he had never known. He said he felt overwhelmed but also grateful. The young man reached toward Keanu slightly and said that maybe fate wanted them to meet again on that rainy road. Keanu nodded slowly. Sandra felt tears forming in her eyes. She wiped them discreetly, but the emotion stayed heavy in her chest. The father then looked at his son with deep seriousness. He said that the fight between them was painful, but it did not erase the love he felt. He said he wanted to rebuild what had fallen apart. He told him he needed honesty and patience, not fear. The young man nodded with tears running down quietly. He whispered that he wanted the same. He said he was tired of carrying pain alone. Keanu gently placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. He told him life sometimes pulls people apart so it can bring them back together with deeper understanding. He said what mattered was not the mistakes, but the courage to face them. Sandra watched both of them with admiration. She felt grateful to witness such a moment. The father stood slowly. He said there was one more truth they needed to hear, something he had never shared with anyone, something connected to why he grew distant over the years, something he feared would change everything. He walked toward a small drawer near the fireplace. His hands shook as he reached inside. Keanu and Sandra waited quietly. The young man's heart beat fast. The father turned back toward them holding a small folded letter in his hand. It looked old and worn. He said the final truth was written inside this letter. He said it was something Keanu was meant to know long ago, something that would explain why fate had brought them all together again on this rainy day. The room fell silent. The father held out the letter with trembling hands. The truth inside was the one thing that could deepen their bond or break it completely. The father stood with the old folded letter trembling between his fingers. The room felt heavier than before. The air was warm from the fireplace, but everyone felt a quiet chill move through their chest. Sandra placed her hand gently on the young man's arm to steady him while Keanu remained completely still. The wet sound of rain dripping from the porch roof was the only noise in the world. The father took a deep breath and said the letter had been written many years ago by the person who once made the promise about Keanu. He said it had arrived the same week everything in Keanu's life collapsed, and he had taken him into the house. But he had never found the courage to give the letter to him, not because the truth was cruel, but because the truth was too emotional. He said he feared the letter would break Keanu when he was already too fragile. Keanu's eyes softened, but his expression was full of deep confusion. He stood slowly and walked toward the father. He asked quietly if he could read it now. The father nodded and handed it to him with trembling hands. Keanu held the paper gently as if it was made of thin glass ready to shatter. Sandra watched him with full care, knowing this moment carried a lifetime of weight. Keanu unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting was faded but still readable. He took a slow breath and began reading aloud. The message was simple but filled with depth. The writer explained that they had watched Keanu grow through pain and struggle with quiet strength. They spoke about the love they carried for him. They said they knew their life was coming to an end, and they asked the father to protect him if he ever fell into darkness. Then the letter revealed something that made Keanu's breath break. The writer said Keanu had always believed he was alone, but he was not. They wrote that Keanu was like family, not chosen by blood but by heart. They said Keanu was the closest thing they ever had to a child, and they saw a future for him even when he could not see one for himself. They said they believed he would grow into a kind and strong man who would change lives with his heart. And the last line said something that made Sandra cover her mouth. It said Keanu was never meant to walk the world alone. Keanu lowered the letter. His hands shook. His eyes glistened with quiet tears. He did not sob. He did not break down, but something inside him opened. Something he had carried silently for a lifetime. The room felt the shift. The father stepped closer and said he had kept this letter because he did not want to burden him during his darkest years. He said he regretted waiting so long. He said he hoped Keanu could forgive him. Keanu stared at the letter for a long moment before stepping toward the father and placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. He said he did not feel any anger. He said the letter felt like a final hug from someone he had lost. He said the truth did not break him. It healed him. Keanu's voice was soft but strong. He said he felt grateful to finally understand the depth of the love that once protected him. The young man had tears rolling down his cheeks now. He whispered that he never knew Keanu had been part of his father's heart for so long. He said he understood now why his father sometimes spoke with deep sadness about someone from the past. Sandra moved closer to them. Her eyes were warm and emotional. She said sometimes people enter our lives not to stay forever, but to guide us toward the right people at the right moment. The father sat down slowly as if the weight he had carried for years finally loosened. He said he was sorry for the distance that had grown between him and his son. He said he had tried to be strong, but he had forgotten to show his own fears. The young man rushed toward him and hugged him tightly. Sandra felt her eyes burn again. She watched father and son hold each other with so much relief that the silence felt sacred. Keanu watched them with a soft smile. He knew the pain that had kept them apart would not vanish in one moment, but this was the beginning of healing. When the young man finally pulled back, he wiped his eyes and looked at Keanu. He told him he was grateful to have met him. He said he felt honored knowing he carried part of Keanu's story in his own name. Keanu stepped forward and placed both hands on the young man's shoulders. He said names do not matter as much as actions. He said he felt honored too, because the young man carried kindness despite pain. He said he saw strength in him that reminded him of the man his father once was. Sandra stepped beside Keanu and placed her hands softly on his back. She said fate had strange ways of bringing hearts together. She said none of them had arrived on that rainy road by accident. She said maybe the rain was only a door that opened the path they all needed. Keanu smiled gently. He agreed. He said sometimes rain cleans more than the earth. It cleans the heart. The father stood again. He asked if they could all sit together for a warm drink. He said he wanted to talk properly for the first time in years. The young man nodded quickly, and Sandra agreed with a warm smile. Keanu nodded too. They all moved to the kitchen where the father prepared tea and placed old cups on the table. The smell filled the room with warmth and comfort. Sandra looked around the house. She felt a sense of peace settling over everything. They sat together for a long time. The conversation was slow, gentle, and human. They spoke about past memories and future hopes. They shared moments they had never said aloud. The father apologized for the pain he caused. The young man admitted his own fears. Keanu expressed gratitude for the protection he received years ago. Sandra listened with full warmth and offered soft words whenever needed. After some time, the rain outside finally stopped. The clouds began to break and a soft, golden light filled the sky. The house felt lighter too, as if years of unspoken words had finally found their place. When it was time for Keanu and Sandra to leave, the young man stood with them outside. He hugged his father again and promised to return home soon. Then he turned to Keanu and hugged him with sincerity. Keanu hugged him back gently. As Keanu and Sandra walked down the hill together, the sky glowed with soft, warm light. Sandra looked at him and said she was proud of the way he carried his heart through pain. Keanu smiled with gratitude. He said he felt different inside, as if something had finally been set free. They walked slowly, their footsteps quiet on the damp road. When they reached the small wooden shelter where everything began, the rainwater on the ground sparkled with the last light of the evening. Sandra looked up at the gray-orange sky and whispered that this simple rainy stop had changed 3 lives. Keanu nodded and said sometimes the most beautiful conversations happen when you least expect them. They continued walking together into the calm evening. There was no crowd, no noise, no rush, just 2 hearts walking side by side after witnessing a moment of truth, healing, and kindness. The quiet road, the rain, and the unexpected meeting had all been part of a path they never planned but deeply needed. And as they disappeared down the peaceful countryside road, the world around them felt softer. The rain had stopped, but the warmth it brought would stay with them forever.